I just realized that we don't know so much about ourselves. We can know about this and that, but after all, it all goes down to that how do we express ourselves? Are we free in self-expression? Do we know what we truly want? And what this knowing is based on? Is it based on distortions, or is it based on really perceiving that emptiness and contentment and being kind of whole, and really understanding that as I am, I'm whole, but I exist in the body, and also knowing the body to the T, to such a degree that you understand the vibration which can enhance what you already feel within yourself. And so when you choose someone with who you feel the same wavelength or frequency. Because if you choose, let's say, someone only on one level, but then on the other level there is nothing, it has to be like you know, like a stream which is going from the higher through the body to the and then the body is a culmination, but the higher has to be there, and the connection on all the levels. Like you see the world the same way, you see also you see yourself let's say evolving together, developing certain things, or that person supports you in what you do right now, or whatever. There is a link there that nurtures the union, because after all, the union in this, at least day and age, will result in a physical union. So but this physical union, if it's not nurtured by all the subtle aspects like intellectual and, you know, emotional and so on, mental vision, sooner or later there can be someone else that will fulfill that. Or sometimes you compromise, okay, like everything is okay, this little thing is not okay, but we can adjust. No, these things don't happen, because people normally, they have a core, and sometimes it's also a question. Let's say you feel some spark towards someone, like a romantic feeling, but the question is, what is it based on? Is it based on something that you're not fulfilled about it at this point of time? Or is it really that connection that is going from top to bottom? You see, this is always a question. It's a dilemma for all of us.
But is it not very simple to see when you make the right choice, in a sense, if you come from a place of contentment and it's not
But the question is there a right choice? Because we think like this from the bodily perspective, because right now, let's say today it's right.
There is not right, but there is more like the decision most closest to you, to your essence, or how to call.
Okay, but let's say, okay, today it's right. But let's say, okay, if you made a decision in 2017, and in 2017 it was right for you. In 2019, maybe you would never make that decision because it wasn't right for you. Do you know what I mean?
It depends on your level of
evolution,
level of where you are at that moment. But it's always a matter of contentment, I think. If you come from a place of contentment and you express yourself from that place, it doesn't matter where you are at the level.
Contentment doesn't mean that you don't evolve, because even if you are able to go back to the natural being, because natural being and contentment, it's like a foundation, it's always there. It means no matter what turmoil you're experiencing outwards, you can always come back. That's always there, that's a given, that's a foundation. And of course, upon that foundation, you can try to compromise in life, you can try to find solution, you can try to see things from different perspectives, right? But still, besides the contentment, there is also you, there is that personality, that particular thing that you want, that particular frequency, these waves that are going all the time there.
Desires.
And so, or whatever, desires or anything. And then the other person the same. And they say when you meet at this point, it's like it all seems to be matching. But then with time, you're not static and they are not static. But evolution happens in every person in their own pace, you know, because some person just gets like this faster. Their soul is capable of, you know, like shedding nonsense and illusions. And the other one doesn't do it. And at some point, if you shed certain layers within yourself that connected you to that person, because after all, it's still personality and we still connect through some kind of aspects. Let's not call them distortions. Let's call them inclinations in ourselves that connect, right? But at some point, maybe you shed that inclination And
but then it's time to go. So I think they are all like all these situations and people on your path are all like a catalyst in your evolution.
yeah, but then the catalyst has to go because there's nothing there inside you.
Of course, at a certain moment you have to go. It's just the most important thing is to be aware why you feel attracted or connected to something or someone.
Yes.
I think if there's the awareness, it's not about good or bad, but I think it's just wise if you're just aware of every connection or attraction you have, where it comes from.
There's nothing wrong in diving. Just dive, just be there. Now it's right. Period.
Exactly.
Enjoy.
Exactly. Yes.
Enjoy.
Yes.
But once time goes, and the time is the best teacher. That's why the time is considered the superb, exalted teacher, because the time will show. Sometimes people can be evolving and vibrating even through years on the same frequency because they somehow evolve at the same time, or there is no much gap. But with some people, we feel so, wow, like everything is perfect. But it doesn't last long because you see things already, and then in next year from a different perspective, they are still stagnant on the same frequency. That frequency does not interest you anymore because you don't have that or anymore within you that would connect that which they have, they still cherish. And that's why evolution is faster. And many times people nowadays, they complain, why can't I stay in one relationship? Because they first of all don't know who they are. So by bumping onto different people, they kind of have more chance to realize, but then it's kind of against the whole establishment of the system, right? And I don't think that it has to be like this or like that, but it's just another form of experience which people can have on this earth that, let's say we don't put tags, we don't put anything. Okay, you want to experience, but there is another side of it. For example, if people are driven by lust and they're like, I let it go, I just want to go into it. Okay, but the result of this will be possible STD, the sexually transmitted disease, or possible some kind of weakness inside, or possible maybe the person who you copulate with has parasites and so it affects your being, you understand? So because we are not pure vessels. So only a pure vessel can recognize pure vessel. Or an enlightened being can recognize an enlightened being. Like someone on YouTube asked me, how can you, what if this enlightened being is like this, or how can I know? You cannot know, because only enlightened being can see enlightened being. And a thief can recognize a thief. You know, and a businessman sees another businessman. Because you have a standard according to which you see who is who, and you by your own frequency relate to them. But the connection happens through the same frequency. And so the more you evolve, the more you see what people have within themselves, to the degree you see yourself. For example, the deeper you see yourself, the deeper you will see people, and the deeper you will understand the inclinations and distortions.
It's not easy in a sense, like of course the more you evolve, the less you're dependent on external things, but it's very hard to find people who to really connect with and be on the same frequency. The more you evolve, it's more like you really it's like you're kind of like really alone. And I think it's not that's what I experience. It's like
independence is, we can never be independent. We are a part of the collective, but we can be autonomous in our perception.
That's but it's more like of course we are all interconnected. I totally agree with that, but it's more like being on the same frequency with a person. It's very hard to find this, or maybe this is also a distortion because why is it so hard to attract people on the same level, on the same frequency, why is it so hard?
The more you disillusion yourself, the more you refine yourself, the lesser the people you will find at this point of time. But it's not from the point of an unrefined being I'm saying this thing. It's not from the point of I'm narcissist, I'm so spiritual and I can't find anyone. No, it's from the point that you are flowing and other people are more stagnant within themselves. So when you have returned, awakened being means I've returned to my flow and I'm flowing there. My flow is the same as the universal natural flow. So I'm not disconnected, but I am able to consciously see, because my personal being or awareness is there. It's observing things without judgment, and yet it's not connecting to others because of being judgmental or not judgmental. It's not connecting because there is no frequency that connects this being with the other. And after all, if those other evolved or returned to the same natural flow, there would be no contradiction. There would be just silence and bliss. But as long as they are, manifesting themselves through the body, the distortion is manifesting through the prism of their emotions, personal inclinations, personal distortions, and how this all is translated into the bodily existence.
Yeah.
So when you are in the bodily existence, it's not just that flow, it's how you also translate it. So the difference between, I would say, a more evolved and refined being and a lesser is that the stream of consciousness is not much veiled or interrupted, because it's just as that existence which is ultimate or undistorted or whatever you call it, it will be just flowing, and that's what is called spiritual transmission. And the distorted way of spiritual transmission is that is still flowing, but there are veils and layers and prisms through which it's either not reaching the body and nurturing the body at all, or reaching it only to a certain degree where the body creates a sense of some importance within itself, because it still has no depth, no such a deep and straightforward connection within that ultimate within itself. But after all, it's all the self. It's just different dimensions through which it maps out or lays out somehow. So, and when we keep that awareness, it means we are aware of multidimensionality of the self. The majority of people do not have such perspective. They have a perspective of being in the body, and whatever their emotional layer is, the emotional dominates the body. Not the consciousness dominates the body, but emotions take over the body and make one feel that this is how life is. It's only that emotional prism and bodily perception or bodily interest, which is related to the senses.
It was basically what you said previously, like there is so much suppression in people through which they cannot naturally express themselves. It's all from, it comes all from a suppressed being, basically. And it's victimized,
or again, because it's all victimized. What is victimization? Victimization means my individual being does not perceive the flow of the wholesome reality. And so it divides everything and compares everything or relates everything to just the bodily existence, the limited existence of self. And that's why it's ignorant, and that's why it cannot, exhibit natural being or natural wisdom or that higher consciousness or intelligence of creation within which it lives, or a part of which it is. So, because even though it is a part of creation at all point of time, but it is not aware of that, or it forgets, or it so much empowers the man-made, the human-made reality, which is so much supported by emotions and mental flows, that the natural flow is not, let's say, perceived. It doesn't dominate this particular day and age and reality of a man-made, of a human existence,
It's like, in essence, already, if you don't experience life and yourself holistically, you're already like corrupted, basically. So that's already the form of suppression. It's they experience life very fragmentedly, like
but the paradox, the paradox is that when the individual being, let's say, in their body, through the embodiment, experience the natural flow, because it returned consciously back to it and is nurtured now, is cultivating. Cultivating means it's always aware. The link is always there. So through this connection, they actually humble down. There is no way that through this connection one can exhibit the limited self-expression or so-called selfishness, because that's why the flow, because the flow itself is selfless, because there is such a perception of a higher greatness that one cannot just appear as a selfish person, because that selfishness, that narcissism on whichever level, whether emotional narcissism, spiritual narcissism, physical selfishness, whatever on a limited sense, it's only this selfishness is only there because there is no connection to natural flow. So let's say an enlightened being from a higher standpoint is a free-flowing being. Yes, is a being. At least it's in my individual perspective, from whatever experience of life I have. It's a flowing. It's an absolutely unlimited. Unlimited means it accepts that all possibilities can be there on all levels. So there is no separation of this is my emotional life, this is my sexual life, this is my mental life. It's a flow through which this natural being is flowing and resulting or appearing, manifesting through all the layers. And yet the consciousness is unobstructed by any layer, because it is the consciousness that experiences the body, and not just the body being the body and experiencing the body and emotions. No, it's a different perspective because of the different experience. Now, the being who has absolute free expression does not perform, does not deliberately teach, does not deliberately heal, does not deliberately want anything, because it's just a flow of their being, and their flow may be interpreted by other people this way or that way, but the flow is uninterrupted.
Is it true that evolution never stops, even for a Jivanmukti or a Jivanmukta who leaves his or her body, it still goes through evolution and grows?
Jivanmukti is only a transitory state. Jivanmukti is a transitory state. I wouldn't say Jivanmukti is that state. It's like you made one step towards perfection, which either unfolds or the person plunges then maybe or stays for a while in that state. Because Jivanmukti means it is a transit, it is a potentiality or potential to evolve to a more perfected being, Siddha being. And there are many layers and levels of perfection which never end. So, but at this day and age, we assume that the state of Jivanmukta or Jivanmukti, or the state of this and that, is some kind of an evolution. Yes, it looks like, but it's just right now our evolution means that we just return to the natural being. Even to return to that which we already are and always were is considered as some kind of a know-how or wow, or people make a big deal out of it. But awakening is nothing but returning to natural flow. What does it mean? Once you return to a natural flow, it's like a spark you feel within yourself. You love yourself. You actually return to love and respect and contentment, but you just explain it as a human that, oh, that feels like I love myself. That feels like, but it's an explanation. After all, it's just a flow. People can explain it, oh, it's divine. People can explain it, oh, it's love, but they explain it still through distortions. Even when they return to natural flow, the distortions are not refined yet. And that's where the catch is, because the awakened person made the first step towards the refinement. And refinement is very ongoing, because even when you know a lot of knowledge and concepts and everything, you understand that if you were a particle, it all wouldn't matter. And so whatever you do, you're basically, through refinement, you're shedding illusions on different levels, even on spiritual level at some point, where you understand that all different powers and abilities to manipulate reality, to do this and that, they are only relevant as long as you are in the body and you're a part of this embodied reality.
So that means that if the road to perfection is like infinite, you have to pierce through infinite layers to reach. No, there is no reach. So the road to perfection is infinite. That means that is it true that there is always a form of corruption, or is the form of corruption only related to the mind identity or the physical reality?
Because the corruption can be on all levels.
So the whole is corruption.
It's not a corruption. We call it corruption since on the physical level it's very obvious. But on a subtle level, these are different waves, because consciousness experiences different layers within itself. And it's just flowing. There's nothing wrong or right with the corruption or no corruption. It's just consciousness dives through the cycle of degradation into the matter, or the more grosser layers of creation. And then through the evolution processes, just experiences the other cycle, which is growing out of the degradation. But both are a part of a creation and a possibility of experience anything within this creation. So nothing is wrong.
So ignorance is like a fixed, ignorance is always part of reality and existence.
What is ignorance? Ignorance means that one is not connected with the natural flow. So one is to such a degree disconnected and discontent because one is not nurtured by the natural flow of the ultimate. And ultimate is just a natural flow, that blissful, wholesome perception of everything and self at the same time. So this flow is distorted, it's veiled. And that's why the person feels that there is a need for something else. There is a need to supplement this, emptiness, kind of emptiness in the sense of lack of something within the self.
So what you say
with the physical reality or with emotional layer or something. But all of these are just fragments, because even they can make the soul rejoice for a second. They are not going to restore, or they do not actually restore that natural flow. And that's where the spirituality arises. There wouldn't be even a need for spirituality as such, as a term, in other ages, or in the ages of whatever, golden ages or enlightenment, because their life was itself enlightened, meaning everyone was connected and there was an absolute free self-expression. That's why it's called the age of truth. Truth means whatever I am emanating through whatever layer, physical or my subtle body, but that subtle body is not polluted by emotional and mental reality of a human man-made now current reality, because this man-made reality is like sub-reality which has been created through the corruption of consciousness. And so the more you ascend, then this reality dissolves, the emotional mental reality dissolves, and so the body dissolves as well in the higher levels. You understand? But the body, meaning the physical body, dissolves, but then there are subtle bodies which are going through their own levels of evolution, and so the refinement on that level is cannot be called as suffering or any kind. It's just an experience, because
so level is just an experience. So basically we only talk about corruption and ignorance once we are still not yet connected to the flow, and
you
once
see,
we are in the flow,
we would notice it's a corruption if we notice it, because we consider it as suffering or happiness, temporary happiness, which we want to constantly have. So it's again suffering, or suffering because something hurts, or we're afraid of something. So these emotions, they make us feel like we're suffering. And that's why we assume it's corruption. It's just another experience, but we assume and we want to get rid of it. But it's again, it has the seed of corruption in itself that you want to rid. Instead, that's why I always say that whatever binds you liberates. It's just an experience of, it's just an experience where consciousness literally immerses itself into the gross reality and kind of experiences what would it be if I never thought that I am something more than that. How would the life be? And that's what we experience now. The life is like this because we're not aware. Now, the more we become aware, the more we again start ascending, because we see there are other dimensions which we were not aware of before. And again, why to judge it, whether it's good or bad? It's like a process. It's like a cycle. Can you judge the solar cycle? That, it's going, in winter we don't see the sun, and in summer we see it. So in summer is good and winter is bad. No, these are cycles. This is what's happening, because different consciousness can and this is like a collective consciousness. It's a cluster that is going through a cycle. So we are part of that cluster, which resonates with this cycle. We experience this, and then we evolve further. And so who is special, who is enlightened, and who is not? It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because some soul in the collective consciousness restored the connection with the flow. Now, through this restoration, slowly, other souls start restoring, because they are impacting each other. They are in a constant, you may say, spiritual, emotional, mental copulation. Now,
and how does the flow actually influences a character of a being? Like, for example, if like everybody would be connected to the flow, how would this express and have effect on a character of a person? Like, of course, a person who's connected to the flow will live probably to higher values, be truthful to yourself, truthful to others, I think.
Character, yeah, but it's yin yang. So there is never 100% light and 100% darkness. There is always, so this is how consciousness is like going from a darker cycle to the white cycle. And but these are all, again, these are ideas of a human embodied reality. So we conceptualized a natural flow into something that is familiar to us. We were familiar with nature, so we compared it with nature, seasons, cycles that we observe. But after all, this is just a cycle of consciousness diving into material, more matter, and more like coming out of it. And yet it's circular, because sometimes it can be perceived, but it's just different conscious levels. They go through these cycles, and then they realize, and they come out of the cycle and go into something which we don't even know, can imagine. And what comes to character, like Lao Tzu said, for instance, character is something that is built through habits. It's something that people get used to, and then it becomes a part of their life, and they acquire certain qualities. So the process of self-refinement, meaning coming back to the natural being, which doesn't have any particular qualities, or these qualities can be just more simplified. That's why I think that in yoga or Ayurveda, the whole reality of creation was seen through gunas, because it just shows that first there is this one thing, then it divides into two. It's the same as similar to Taoism. Of course, these are just conceptualized knowledge, which just was passed on already towards the end of the degradation process, or when we just ended up being completely limited in our bodies. And so we cannot so far understand how it would be actually, and what it is actually, because we're not on a quantum level of being a particle and perceiving at the same time self as on many levels, and the body at the same time. So why do you think people who complete this cycle, they can even dissolve? Because they understand how creation works. So they can dissolve, their bodies disappear as if, but they are just in a subtle level. And what is subtle is a different question. But so all these characteristics that we acquire through this process of degradation. What is process of degradation? Means from a free experience of life, we collect into some kind of forms. Okay, we're tribes, we're nations, so these divisions, the more we divide, the more we multiply, the more we're degraded, because we cannot see the wholesomeness of our even collective existence. And so now we start acquiring individual things. We start showing that, oh, I have this preference, I have that. This is the way the being experiences its multiplicity within itself and within the collective. Oh, and then people assume we have so many things. We can have whatever we want to have, but it's just, this is not actually us. It's just because we're so separate from the flow that we need to keep on dividing and finding something as if fulfilling within ourselves. But it's finding through division. But refinement means we are going back into less and less. And then we end up with just this sort of two aspects within. But it is again, it's only in our head. All these divisions and concepts are only within our head, because there are these, we just have qualities. We can express ourselves negatively, or we can express ourselves positive. But once the division happens, the negative is divided into many possibilities. For example, It's basically just the, let's say, the energy of destruction. And the energy of destruction is what? It's anger. Anger, right? The energy of suppression is what? Fear. And the energy of benevolence and creation and support of what is there already, nurturing, is love.
Yeah.
So eventually, and once you divide this and or multiply, kind of, yeah, you divide each, and it becomes like a multiplicity of anger, what, like jealousy, envy, you know, fear goes into. So all of these qualities, because we want, for example, we want to sustain our reality. So we're so fearful that if we do something wrong, it won't stay there. Or we want to nurture our reality because we want to prolong our goodness or some good things which we experience. But how do we know what we experience is good? It's because our body is pleased, because our mind is calm, so, or something makes us excited. So we assume it's good for us.
So when there is no preference, you're not triggered anymore to use certain emotions, to get triggered in certain
emotions. You are not triggered, but you can, because anger then is just a free flow of expression. When you see that I set a boundary, that's it. This is not for me.
Yeah.
So these things, we are imbued with these. These are just natural ways that consciousness can express itself. So in the pure form, there's nothing wrong with these. In pure form, there's nothing wrong with blessing. That actual love is a blessing. The actual drawing line or disconnecting from something or seeing that something is unnecessary is the anger. But fear in this case doesn't exist. Because there is a connection with the flow.
Yeah.
Fear is like a clog. It stagnates the flow because it contracts the entire being, and it's like a clog. There is no flow. The anger is a flow, but it's only one-sided. The blessing is a flow, but it's good, but it's temporary.
But every form of emotion, expression of emotion is one-sided.
This is not even emotion. This is a pure form of expression of a being through the embodiment. They are there. These are qualities. But these qualities, so any consciousness can express these qualities. But when these qualities are connected to our stories, connected to our limited individual context, they become as a part of our, illusionary existence, where we are pushed to act from within in an unnatural way. But then with time, we accept that this is natural, and so we call it a character. But a totally refined person does not even appear as anything, yet they can appear as angry when they just don't want. This is it. For them, it's enough. And this is not mental decision. Oh, I don't like something, or I like. There is no idea of liking or disliking. It's just that the flow, this seems to be enough. So the line is drawn. For example, if I don't want to talk right now anymore, the body feels I want just to stay. I want my body now to recuperate or to regain my strength. So I keep silence then, right? So, but there is no, is it good? Is it bad? What people will think, you understand? These are all sub-dimensions which are created through distortions.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a difference basically. You have one which is like very reacting from a lower consciousness, maybe a wrong word, but it's like very reactive. And the other one is just you
from a limited consciousness. Limited consciousness means it's limited in itself. It limits itself by its own choice to emphasize something within itself and empower it and feel that this is important, or this makes sense, or this is something that defines the sense of I am.
Who you think you are.
Who you are. Exactly. And this sense is limited because it is not coming from the flow of conscious being, of the natural flow of the existence, but it comes forth through a limited perception where awareness cannot, there's limited awareness. But why it's limited? Because awareness is not flowing in a natural way. It goes through prism and limitations and appears like some kind of a limited being.
So it's all about, this is amazing, by the way. It's like like my brain is like I love this. It's like you go through
But you
wormholes
see,
and wormholes.
whatever is uttered by words, if you do not perceive transmission, if you cannot really perceive it right now when it's spoken, uh,
Yeah.
in your physical body, it's all just a dry knowledge. Someone else pops up there on YouTube and uses similar words or says something else. But yet, if it's not supported by transmission, it means that being who speaks is not connected. So they're just speculating. They read something and now they feel bold and they feel confident that they can just use the same phrases. They can speak about the same things, and yet they are not that. That's why the true knowledge is always preserved by only one can be the true knowledge. They're the vessel. Whoever says what, if they're not the vessel, there is a separation. There is this divine and me, knowledge and me, a spirituality and me. The evolved being means they return to the natural flow. They are not separate from the natural flow. They're not separate from life. They're not separate from anything. They are just a flow of spirituality, intellect, everything in one being. And so they are expressing themselves freely through their body as well. But such a science of free expression through the body is the most advanced. Because the more the person is ignorant, the less they can understand what their body is and how invaluable it is, because it's the fruit that defines whether the fruit is with the flow, is the part of the flow of creation, is enlightened by that flow, or is not. So the body is that.
It boils down to that we just identify ourselves with an ego identity, and everything what we basically do, everything, how we wear clothes, how we look, what we eat, the people we hang out with, everything is just to make sure that our ego identity has a right to exist. Everything is based on that. Basically, we are like amplifying and fueling it with energy and food to live, basically, the ego identity. And
it's
so
called corrupt identity. There's nothing wrong with the
that's
ego,
what I
but
mean.
ego evolves. Ego evolves, so ego becomes subtler and subtler. You know, this is the thing. There is always identity, but at first it is an identity with the body and a bodily existence, like not as a part of the collective consciousness, but as an individual. Evolved consciousness is not separate, doesn't have names, but it has a form of a collective. It's just like a space, like a certain cluster, you can I call it evolved cluster. So when we think, oh, siddhas and yogis, they are like, there is this one siddha or one yogi. No, it's a siddha consciousness, which is like a cluster. And for an individual being, for an ignorant being, to understand what a cluster is very difficult, because the individuality is not dissolved, that corrupt, the limited, which keeps that individual being stuck to the body and the mundane and the bodily reality. Because everything, even the way we understand spirituality, is only about the body. It's all our understanding is just body, because even the way our spirituality is, it's a bodily spirituality. It's like what my body does, it goes for pilgrimage, it goes for worship, it goes for chanting, it wears this, it wears that. So the spirituality, as long as the consciousness is engrossed in the reality of the body, spirituality cannot be understood beyond the body. So it's a bodily spirituality. The spirituality that is the message that I'm trying to convey here, that spirituality is so much beyond, but it cannot be understood by the current beings, because they are so engrossed in the body. If the body hurts, they need a remedy. That's why spirituality becomes, instead of just a flow, it becomes a healing tool. Or they need a solution, so it becomes a way to find a solution to, again, to what? To the limited.
But then actually you can only spirituality starts only when you are like not identified anymore with the limited perception of yourself. Otherwise it's just an illusion, and of course you're evolving and going to somewhere, or you're evolving, but still it's like true spirituality then only starts when there is no identification with the limited self anymore, right? Actually,
there is no such a thing as spirituality or no spirituality. It's just a flow, natural flow of being within the creation. And the creation also exists on so many levels, you know. But the perception at this point of time it's impossible to imagine the subtler layers for the majority of people. It's just like I'm talking nonsense right now, you know, because it's like, let's say if you were speaking about aliens like 1,000 years ago, you would be probably locked up in a mental institution, or you would be prosecuted by
You will be killed or something.
yeah, by some religious groups. But right now we still give it a chance. So this is what is evolution, that we open up, our awareness becomes more aware that there is something beyond the bodily existence. That's all what means evolution. So whether you call it spiritual or not, evolution is just life in which we experience and kind of realize. So there is no such a thing as finite self-realization. You know,
how do you know if you if a person what is needed to become like an enlightened being, in a sense, like
you can't become anything.
No, exactly. It's not becoming, but it's more like what attitude is needed to pierce through all layers of illusion? Is it like a motivation? For me, for example, how I experience it, it's that like I just cannot do anything else than that. It's just I'm just pushed in this direction. And before, like when I started on the spiritual, it was more like a form of escaping, of a searching for something. But what is the right attitude to reach to this point? What is the right motivation or right attitude towards spirituality? Or is it not needed to have a certain attitude? Or
again, in your question, there is a division of life into different elements. For example, this is spirituality and this is not. We all evolve in our own pace. We all see life in a way that we are capable of at this point of time, and this is all right. We are already spiritual. We are already that being. We are already that, but we are not connected, because we are connected on some level, yes, but it is so obstructed by veils that our bodily existence is drained, and that's why our lifespan is so short, because we are not nurtured through that flow. That's why the whole spirituality arises out of ignorance, that we need to restore. We need to basically come back to our natural, because we went too far from the natural. So here again, there is some kind of a division between but this process of coming back is instant. That's called awakening. But not every consciousness can even accept such a possibility, because there is no maturity, because that consciousness in that individual body is still going through the process of experiencing ignorance, and that's okay, or experiencing just matter and enjoying that matter, and there's nothing wrong with it. But then when the time comes and the soul itself, the being, starts searching, it feels that that's enough. It's something within the self that happens that pushes one to search. But because there are still veils, distortions, inclinations, to find that this is so simple and natural is difficult. And this is where the paradox is, because the being cannot realize that it's so simple, that it's just about turning within. So it still disperses in its search and goes through different points outwardly, or in the manifested reality, searching for truth. Once the soul realizes that there is no truth in the manifested reality, it but naturally turns within. And this is the point which is called spiritual maturity, where the soul realizes that I am already complete. And this is the point of awakening. But even by perceiving that completeness, it's not fully restored, because that is why it's called cultivation or refinement, through which you start just simply seeing through the natural flow of being that all the other layers are still there. And that's why the process becomes so challenging, and that's why many people do not go further, because they assume that if they are able to go back to contentment at any point, that they already refined. So the work is stopped at that point, and the ego is creating, not the ego, but the limited sense of self creates an importance to just the fact that one can return to the natural being. So there is no actual spiritual progress in this sense. The progress is thwarted by the sense that I am already something. Because again, the limited wants to try to make sense or out of what is happening, or that I reach something and I've become something. But there's nothing to become. It's only that I restored the flow, and through that flow of equanimous being, I can simply observe what is not equanimous being, what is false, what is delusional, what is projection. And if I have that courage to understand, or no guidance, let's say, or some kind of inner intuitive perception that this is the way to refine myself through that meditative absorption of being in that ultimate, or cultivating that ultimate, that I would refine all that which is illusionary, then I am just going to take detours. I'm again going to create something out of myself and going to live through it. And this is okay, because many times, wait a second, many times people take this time to go. Again, they a little bit tasted reality, but again, it's not their time yet to go on the path of refinement, and you actually don't go anywhere. It's a perception that this is the tool, not the achievement. It's the means, because this is the flow that we need to restore. But right now it's just a drop by drop. And you need to remove that which obstructs it so that it becomes a flow, a stream. That is what is called Shaktipat stream. No one can give Shaktipat, no one can take, no one can do anything. It's actually the flow of the being. It's just one individual soul opens up to it. Again, people create, an ego or some kind of an idea that they've achieved something and none they can give. You can emanate, you are that. So the more you refine, the stronger is the flow, the stronger is the emanation. And just by looking at another person, there is an absolute connection, and there is an absolute flow, and the other person instantly perceives that flow within themselves. And that's it. That's all about Shaktipat. It's a grace that is already there. And people can use religious concepts. It's a grace, it's divinity, it's love, it's this and that, it's energy. Nothing, just being to which you open yourself, because you matured to the point where you realize that this is a veil, you removed it, and the flow started going within. And so is it special? Is it something that is like somebody needs to get a crown for that? No. It's because we go to the other point of, collective consciousness, where our presence, if you are the awakened being, if I'm the awakened being, and we refine ourselves, so we contribute to the collective refinement by just being there in that collective consciousness, in the physical body, by just interacting, by even if nobody knows what you are, just by being in contact through your own memory or through their memory, the fact that they remember you, the fact that you sometimes think of them, it becomes a connection through which teaching and learning happens naturally, because it's like connecting to a vortex through which the teaching and learning happens. But no one is different, no one is superior or inferior in this vortex, because this vortex is like a space. It's an, you may call it enlightened space or whatever, the natural space of knowledge, being, contentment, wholesomeness, which just nurtures everyone who connects to it. So the individuality here doesn't even matter through which body. But that particular body in which this consciousness dwells also enlightens, because, or is nurtured by that stream. So if people say they're enlightened, but their body is not nurtured, there's something wrong. That's why Siddha sciences almost died, or they're so hidden and occulted or obscure at the moment, because there is no representation of what that is. Because there is no that body that would emanate that. Or even if that body would be known, imagine how much negativity would be flowing towards obstruction, because that's why Siddhas withdrew themselves. They said that they would not stay here in Kali Yuga because this is too much for the collective. So they withdrew from the collective. So because the collective chose to engross itself in the darkness, in the ignorance. So let's say if someone in this world is broken through, refined themselves, and kind of started vibrating on a higher frequency, definitely they contribute to the collective. But there is also a threat for them because the majority is still in that other frequency, and they prefer that frequency by their own choice. And that's so many times when the being is highly vibrant, they just choose to, vanish from this reality because it's just too on a different level, on a different vibration. And so, but when the time comes and people start more and more evolving, then it's the time when higher consciousness starting to come back to some form of body. It can start, or the souls who start coming to be born here, they are already different frequency because the collective is different, everything is different. But then with each time the world is changed to something altered because the frequency is altered. So we cannot imagine how it is to be in other yugas or eras because we again only measure it by our own current existence. We cannot even imagine what could be there because again our understanding is so limited because we all the time think in terms of what we know of life. But we know that we are this height, this weight, we prefer this and this, the system is like this and this. But maybe even the earth would look different, or the continents, or maybe there would be some other dimension of. So we cannot imagine at this point of time. We should not.
If you're talking like this, I feel a flow. You're flowing and there's so much information coming out and it's so logic for me, and you're connecting so many things. It's like you're opening a whole new dimension of truth, basically. And I often experience this moment as well if I'm talking to people, that I'm so connected with the flow and there comes so much knowledge out of me. And I just experience what is coming out of me, and it's beautiful to experience and to see that's coming out of me. But and I at these moments I experience a form of perfection, but at the same time it does something with my ego. Like I identify myself with that flow and I think, wow, this is me. But how do you experience it when it's coming out of you? Probably this is my ego that I'm experiencing.
This is the thing, that everyone can experience the flow because they can actually restore this by turning within or by being tuned to someone. But this is the trick where, as I said, the flow can be restored, but then there is still all that unrefined stuff. And the moment the flow is restored, or restored even for a short time, it will show what is there to be refined. That's why many times people experience meditative absorption. All of a sudden they say, oh, after that, I see all this negativity comes. Because that negativity is within. It doesn't come from outside. Even though there can be outside triggers. It's all within. Because through meditative absorption, you like shone the light onto those inclinations, desires, distortions. That's where people, if you start associating your limited self with that flow, that it defines your greatness, then you do not see the greatness of the creation and of the natural flow, which is so subtle. And that's where the maturity comes. Because as long as that's where there is a need for someone else who resembles refinement, selflessness, and humbleness or humility to show the way. Because otherwise, if the soul is not fully refined, they will always create magnificence, greatness about that little fragment or that moment, instead of just being that and letting go. And so the person who is refined is very flexible. Yeah. Very flexible, non-judgmental, but sees things very clearly. So I think that clarity is the biggest blessing, because this is the quality, clarity, where there is no way you can tangle, or if you see that there is a certain wave of possible entanglement coming within or arising, you are able to realize where it comes from and understand this is not a part of my natural flow. because nothing, natural flow is not a part of a limited existence or character or being me or not me. It's just a natural flow. So as long as there is no proper refinement, or refinement is not completed, there will always be a thought that, oh, I'm great, what I could do without it. It's immediately the being is trying to transfer the being into action. But the refined being does not rush to act. Or even if they act out of being. That's why there is no impression on their consciousness that they're great because their body says or has spoken something, or has said something, or created an impact on other beings, because they have understood the greatness of the flow rather than the great. So it means that the refinement has been successful, because if the refinement is successful, it means that there is absolute nurturing and yet humility of just being a part of that flow as a drop. Yet you're still aware that you are flow, and you can also be a drop within the flow. So, but you keep both dimensions of both kind of perspectives at the same time. That's why none of the perspectives gives kind of more power and powers one against the other, because it's just a flow. It's just a flow, and there is still awareness that the body is one dimension of self, which is just there. And at some point, no matter how it is enlightened, no matter how it is immortal, it will be dissolved, because that's part of evolution. So this remembrance and this awareness keeps one humble. If that is not there, the being takes the creative energy and goes onto the trips of being something in this reality. And this way they disperse their illumination, or disperse their so-called enlightened flow, whatever they want to call it, the natural flow, that flow that gives them that sense of self, and yet they cannot dissolve the limited. And the limited means that you perceive one moment as if it was an eternity, and you perceive that self as great being as if it was forever to last. But the limited cannot last. So if you are associating with the flow, then the flow does not judge itself. Is it going to be great in the body? Once there is a switch towards the bodily perception again, or I have that flow in the body, it means you're not the flow. You have that flow in the body, but as soon as you are the flow, and whatever else is there is just emanation of you, then you are really established in the being. And through that being, you can refine yourself subtler and subtler and subtler. It means whatever is there still binding you, or maybe you have a certain inclination, you want to offer some service, or you want to still complete something that you consider is to be completed. So you still do it, but there is no sense of greatness there in any form. Because what's great is the conscious being, and you are the conscious being. So the body does not define you. The collective consciousness does not define you, yet you're still a part of that. And so the humility is there because of perceiving strong a stream. Because as long as the stream is not, going strongly there within, I don't know, the words fail here. As long as the natural being is not fully there, dissolving everything, if it's only coming as a drop, or drop by drop, or just a little stream, like little stream, and the veils are still strong, and the distortions and inclinations still powerful, one still has a chance to get lost, to take detours, to fail to recognize certain things, because something within the self will arise and will try to, again, obstruct the flow and limit self in a certain context. I am a teacher now, I am an important being. Because it's interesting, like, imagine you're by bus. All your life is just that, by bus, being by bus. Or whatever you see beautiful houses, you're like, oh, it would be nice to have those. You see humble houses, oh, why people don't repair them. So everything is like that. It's just a scenery. Every life is just some kind of a scenery, and it passes by and nothing happens. But we create a sense of self. Or if I meet this person gives me a sense of self. I'm great now because I'm with this person. Or if I get this job gives me a sense of self. But after all, nothing actually is meaningful. And yet it doesn't mean that we don't need to live or experience. Experience whatever you're inclined to experience, but yet be always aware that there is nothing there that can stay, because every day everything changes. Every day the scenery changes. Even if you live in the same place, you perceive maybe every day the same place differently, because it's not about even what you see or what you hear. It's about how you constantly translate it through your own being into what that is for you, what sense you make out of it all.
Yeah.
And so the wisdom is, when the person refines, they have this wisdom because their consciousness is less clinging. It's just continuously experiences, let's go, experiences, let's go. That's where the flow is continuous. Pulsation. You know, they say that, I don't know, when I was explaining, it came to me, you know, those jellyfish, which are like, they always pulsate. And then they say that actually recent research showed that they're immortal. They can actually regenerate themselves. And so, but this is the pulse of life, the pulse of experience and letting go, experience and letting go. That what doesn't make you perceive life as if it's a chain of events, because that chain you're carrying. And with time, it's so heavy that it just exhausts you to the degree that you die. But it's not that you die, it's the body that has to be shed because it got drained. Because why drained? Because it has not been connected with the stream. It has been only having that connection for a while. And the veils were so strong that they obstructed, and the body, like not being nurtured by that immortal essence, just simply decays and dries and dies. But if you nurture that, the process of life will be perceived differently. And that's why in other yugas people lived longer, because there was a stronger connection within the self. Yes, there was still life, there were still things, but the life was probably perceived in a different way. And so this is how it is. These are just different fields, and we constantly exist through different fields. But as long as you're not aware of it, it all just remains like a theory or someone else's imagination or a story. And that's why this is where the corruption of true knowledge happens. Because if it's not your knowledge, if you do not have that perception within the self, the perception of stream, the knowledge becomes just words. Or people just get impressed because of some little buzz, but they cannot cultivate it within. So it's all dead. It dies. Same way as the body dies, as it's not connected to the stream. So many people talk in such a beautiful way, enlightened. Why they age? Why they are sick? If they are so enlightened, if they are connected to this beautiful immortal essence, because they speak, but they are not that. And that's why people who realize that it's not about who they follow or what they listen to, but about being themselves that vessel, turning within and being themselves the vessel, that's the beginning of realization of the being, which is the knowledge, which is the teaching, which is the learning, which is the evolution. So, all these words, again, all the time our minds trying to disperse reality, which is not dispersible, but they're trying to do it through their own minds, through their limitations, through their emotions, through their desire to be something, or submit themselves to something, or projects their power on someone.
That's the biggest trap, I think, trying to become going somewhere, or thinking you come from somewhere. And go
because you see, victimization can take two forms. Once it's a form of submission where you project your own power and believe that the power is out there and it will save you, protect you, enlighten you, and so on and so forth. And the other one is ego, which is I am self, I'm everything, and yet there is no connection. Because if there is connection, there would be neither of these. There would be neither victimization nor a sense of I'm great or I've achieved anything. because the flow itself is so complete and wholesome that it humbles everything that is on its way. It's like the water eating through the stones, you know.
Yeah.
So it softens.
Wow, that was really a very powerful transmission, I have to say.
Whatever it is, the most important, you feel it because your soul wants it. That's the answer to your question. How does it happen? You cannot cultivate any qualities. Oh, I have to be this, I have to be disciplined. The sense of, I would like my body to be comfortable, disciplined, and healthy arises from the sense of maturity. You cannot just make a person mature and say, hey, don't eat this because this is bad. Because the body itself and the mind limited realize that, oh, when I eat something that hurts me, that creates imbalance, I should not do it probably. Because if you tell an immature person don't eat, they understand it with their mind, but they don't have that sense of responsibility for their existence so that they would apply this knowledge into practice. And the same goes with everything. How can you teach people about natural flow, which cannot be even taught, if they are not willing to connect? Because you can only connect to the natural flow, or return, or turn within, whatever the words again. You can only just connect and be that. You are the vessel. You cannot practice yoga, you cannot practice meditation, you cannot give or take Shaktipat.
Change is only possible through experience, basically, and not through technique.
You within you open up or ignite or connect with that. And whatever is the external reason how you happen to connect to it, it matters to a degree only, because that is something that ignited it, but because the soul itself turned to it. It's like you turn to sun. Until you turn to the sun, you might not even notice that it's shining. Right? So this is the thing, that it's always there, but all the time we're busy, but then one moment we're like, oh, and you turn to the sun and you close your eyes and perceive that sunlight, and you feel complete, like one with that warmth. And the same is turning within towards that which is already there, but the veils, the distortions do not allow you to just tune to that higher frequency. So that's where the problems arise, right?